reach in, reach into all of the areas, the plants and areas where we were. So the elements of the campaign started with us calling on supporters and workers and members of BWFJ to form a leaflet brigade. And that leaflet brigade was targeted to, reach out to a number of plants in the area at the same time, and to encourage them building, committees in that workplace. So we started with the leaflet brigade, and our first task was to go to all of the areas that where we targeted uh, leafleting, and to research the right of way in those areas, so that as management came out to tell us we couldn't be there, we would be standing on firm ground as to where we could stand. And this was the beginning of this process. These things are still reflected in the work of SWA today. And the question of blitzes, we didn't call it a blitz back then. We just called it leafleting the plants. And we were going directly to all of these workplaces. So we determined the right of way, and we trained everybody to how to respond to the police, and not to get into fights with them, and not to fight to go on to the property of these different private companies, but to stand our ground in the public aspect. And we developed a process, and it was very hard, where we did a monthly distribution. We created what we call the Workers Want Fairness Bulletin, and we also have been publishing for a number of years the Justice Speaks newspaper, which we felt, it was organized to give an identity to the struggle of workers, and that the working class, had issues and fight back that were legitimate and should be represented and spoken to, because a few of these things would ever get covered in, the regular news in the area. So, we would get up at 4 in the morning once a month, meet at the Workers Center, pick up flyers and leaflets, and go out. Teams would go out to the different locations all at the same time that morning, and distribute the Workers Want Fairness Bulletin. Our very first meeting, which occurred in 1989, at a church basement, not a basement, but not in the church area, but in the areas where they could have meetings and things. And about 60 workers showed up. Um, 60 workers showed up for that meeting, and it was tremendous. And we called on them to form committees in their workplaces, and that was the beginning of the work. So each worker that was there went back to their workplace and convened meetings of their coworkers to start talking about what their issues and concerns were. And so we had these committees in all these workplaces at the same time. And from that, we formed what we call the Workers' Unity Council. And this was a council of meetings of all of the different plants that were involved, and, in meeting and working on issues inside. This led us to an effort to meet with the National Trade Union Movement, as we were making the point that, the National Trade Union Movement needed to concentrate again on organizing the South. And it led to a number of, NLRB traditional union campaigns. And the people that came forward were the steel workers, the UAW, RWDSU came down, ILGW, UFCW. All of these different national unions came to the Workers Center, and came and made contact with various plants, and held these campaigns. None of them ended up winning, as we see the pattern has continued. And so that was part of our work. The economy then changed during this period, where a number of these plants started leaving the area, just as Sledge Lock had done. They were going to other parts, Mexico and Asia, Guatemala, wherever, Central America, different places where they could pay a fraction to the workers. And so that shift in the economy, brought the public sector front and center nationally for a lot of the unions, and they went into more organizing in the public sector, and we did that too. And we finally had built the relationship with the United Electrical Workers, who came down eventually after we had been organizing a while and began working with us, which led to the emergence of UE Local 150. And this was, we were told at the time, this had been the first time in many, many years, decades and decades, for UE to be in the South organizing. So that, was based on the North Carolina Public Service Workers Network. Next slide, please, quickly. This is a copy just showing the bulletin that we distributed. Usually it was a 8.5 by 14 size on front and back, and we had content there from inside each workplace, what was going on, what issues they were working on, and so that we could kind of begin the elements of class consciousness to, show that the different problems that workers were having weren't just one bad boss or one bad company, but was going on throughout everywhere the workers were at, and so that they had common cause. It was, bigger than just, individuals. It was a class question. And so this is an example of one of the Workers Want Fairness bulletins, and we distributed those every month in these various workplaces. You can go to the next slide, please. This is a list of the plants that the committees were formed in, across Nash and Edgecombe County. Consolidated Diesel, which was an auto plant, Standard Products, an auto plant. There were a couple of light manufacturing plants there. I think one made piano keys, something like that. The Allied Signal Bendix, which was made fuel controls for helicopters and that kind of thing. Pillowtex in the textile industry. And there was a conglomerate of small textile plants in that area of Eastern North Carolina. And, so Pillowtex was one of them, but they had several different locations. And we formed committees and leafleted all of those locations on a regular basis. Rocky Mount Undergarment was another textile plant, and they made not just textiles, but actual sold undergarments. And then the workers in the city of Rocky Mount, which had a long history of organizing anyway previously, challenging unjust working conditions. All of these were areas where we actually formed committees and organizations in the work plants, in the plants, in the workplace. And eventually this, this work led to, the emergence of these poultry plants throughout Eastern North Carolina. And we started also having contact with those poultry plants. As you saw, the first photo that we showed, that was in Duplin County, but there were other counties and areas where poultry plants. So we began doing carpal tunnel release tests for workers to see if they had it, and helping them, to form campaigns around getting, the companies to respond to that. Next slide, please. So yeah, all of this work then, eventually led to the formation of UE Local 150 in both the public and the private sector. And, this was, the Workers Want Fairness campaign was a statewide effort. And, the founding of UE Local 150, took place in the UNC campus janitorial workers, city workers, in Raleigh and Durham, Durham being the first one to join. And also beside the UNC housekeepers, there was the DHHS also that joined the union and made up a portion of, these were state workers working in the hospitals. And so, all over the state. And then, of course, the city workers statewide as we continue to grow. So that was the basic formation. And then Consolidated Diesel then, formed its own private sector, local, CAMU, Carolina Auto and Aerospace Workers Union, and became the private sector section of UE Local 150. So that was the work. Let's see, next slide, please. So I'm going to pass this back to Brother Miri, and we can talk about some other aspects of BWFJ that were important in this work. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mama Shaki. Now I'm going to pass it to Mama Shaf, who also a leader in Black Workers for Justice on this executive committee. And I failed to do a proper introduction of Mama Shaki, but Mama Shaf came down in 1986 and served as editor of Justice Speaks, a organizer, part of his Women's Commission, to name a few things. But she's going to talk about how in these committees the role that independent institutions played for Black Workers for Justice. So, Mama Shaf.
Yeah, thank you, Amiri. I appreciate that. I also want to just give some credit too that yeah, uh Justice Speaks is one of the first institutions named. Started out as a one pager, and Brother Angaza Laughing House had a lot to do with that. And then as it became developed further, Ashaki was the first editor of the paper as a four pager, tabloid size, and then I became managing editor after that. So I wanted to give some, just kind of give a whole picture. And thank you, Ashaki, for those points. Um, Black Works for Justice, in building workplace committees, and then those committees being represented within Black Workers for Justice chapters has always been at the heart of our approach and our perspective. Um, and there were of the chapters that we will get into, in later times, later presentations, were made up of workers or individual workers, but also workers who, had formed the committees, and those committees were represented in the chapters. And so that the workplace-based organizing was the heart of chapter building, and later became also the heart of much of the institutions that we developed. And I wanted to make that point because there were many other plants that existed alongside the plants that Ashaki mentioned, that we were able to build committees. But with the turn down of the economy, um, Rocky Mount suffered more than 15 to 16 plants that shut down, and it completely overturned the economy in the local area. In fact, even, the region, Eastern North Carolina. Um, and so that had a major effect on things. The second thing I want to also point out, as we slide into institutions, is that, this work is long term, and that, as Amiri has mentioned, he's mentioned different years, but this is much of its rural work, and it's work that took place not over a couple of years, but decades. And so, for example, just one example, that before there was UE 150, there was the North Carolina Public Service Workers Union. There was the North Carolina Public Service Workers Organization. And that was that because workers, they felt the need for organization, but they weren't quite ready yet to form a union. And that through their own experiences in fighting management, in fighting in a public presence, they began to understand the need for a union. But even there was a stage before that, and that was the North Carolina Public Service Workers Network. And that was even before folks understood the need for title organization. And so that it be started out as a network, a loose network of workers across the region. And so and when you have a network like that, part of the reason of pulling that together is that, and this on a broader sense, is fighting the kind of isolationism that management and bosses promote, right? They tell you to come on into the job, and if you got a problem, see us one on one. And it always promotes the individualism, and it always promotes, workers thinking that there's nobody else concerned with what they are doing. And so because of that, we felt we really understood in the labor movement, we understood and also know very well that we as workers are whole human beings, and we exist outside the workplace in the community. And so we came to understand the labor movement has the need for community labor alliances to address those needs, to break the isolationism and build support for, union campaigns. With BWFJ, coming out of our history, experience, and organizing background in the Black freedom movement, we took it a step further and building institutions specifically in the community, reflecting values and perspectives open to all of the working class, but also expressive of oppressed peoples. And so that combination of being rooted and grounded in the Black community began, and workers having their own safe space, I think we would use that term now, help to break that kind of isolationism, and over time began to create an atmosphere of much more support. Workers knew that they were not by themselves. These played a critical role existing beyond individual campaigns and work to combat the isolation that bosses promote by bringing workers together to share each other's experiences, support organizing strategies, providing extra ways for workers to relate, debate, question, and hold new experiences. And so some of the, besides Justice Speaks, which I'll go into right now, Justice Speaks tied, as Ashaki said, tied struggles together. We were moving in an area of, Eastern North Carolina in particular, but also in the Piedmont, where it was hours between of driving from one spot to another. We went from as far north as the Virginia line in Northampton County, Halifax County, and you could maybe have to go down to Wayne County, which is maybe a 2.5 hour ride, right, for a meeting. And workers were having, these are many times it was small towns, folks definitely felt by themselves. And so a newspaper that begins to project all of those struggles together, and folks begin to see those same kinds of issues popping up, those same kinds of battles going on, the same kinds of responses going on, and seeing themselves out there. Seeing folks who look like themselves out there, played a major role in helping to build movement. And so, this communications vehicle was extremely important. As I said, it started as a one-pager, laid out by hand, and then moved to we were some of the folks in the spirit of self-reliance. We were the last folks to get computers, and we had something called the OK Pro. We would laugh about it because you could type stuff up like a word processor, and then you pull the strips out and you had to lay it out by hand. Well, other folks had already graduated to much more sophisticated stuff, but we didn't have the money for that. And so even though we didn't have the money, our thing was that we owned this. And so that spirit, that fundamental spirit about building on our own and controlling our own, and workers having that kind of experience that we control this, was extremely important. And it eventually went to an 8 and sometimes 12-page tabloid size monthly newspaper that we published roughly from 1987 through 1994, and then coming out with special editions. Then there's the Abner Berry Freedom Library and Workers Center, a center where workers could meet, plan, strategize, get materials and organizational support. It was pro-union, pro-worker, a pro-worker space. And remember, there were no unions in this area that openly supported workers. There was no place that folks could meet and in a collective sense that they felt comfortable, that they felt they felt safe, that they could strategize. And so having the Workers Center was extremely important. And the library developed. It was, along with Justice Speaks, by the way, named after Abner Berry, who was one of those folks that Amiri mentioned, who comes out of the 1930s. He was a past member of the Communist Party. He was a journalist who covered the United Nations, and he helped give direction, and moved at the age of 80, moved to North Carolina to help found and ground Black Workers for Justice. And it was his idea about the library, his idea about a singing ensemble, his idea about the newspaper. And so we named the library after him. Um, and then in addition to the library and the Worker Center, and of course, we specialize at the library in the kind of books around political economy, in Black liberation, in the global South, and other liberation movements, Mozambique, Angola, Cuba, Panama, Nicaragua, what was happening in Africa, so that workers could have access to the kinds of information that, helped to show that our struggle was a part of the worldwide struggle and that there were other workers coming in. The library also sponsored forums on a regular basis, bringing folks in who normally would only tour the North. And we would get them to come to the South and speak to workers so that they began to understand and see folks in other places, other countries, other parts of the world, other parts of the country who are doing the same work that they're doing. Then we established commissions. And commissions were separate from the chapters and separate from the workplaces, the workplace committees, and they served to bring together folks who dealt with specific issues. So there was the Trade Union Commission, a very active women's commission that worked to struggle around patriarchy in the organization as well as the campaigns of the organization. And then there was a Culture Commission, of which which the Fruit of Labor singing ensemble that everyone loves, was birthed the culture, was the anchor of the Culture Commission. The worker schools. We had a number of worker schools throughout the years, and this included 3 international schools that we will go into in detail in the future. But there was one for public sector workers, one for private sector workers, and one that the Women's Commission organized that included women from 18 countries in Latin America, Asia, and Africa, as well as Europe. And then there was the Salute to Martin Luther King's Support for Labor Banquet. This was an institution. Many people sleep Dr. King. I have a dream ad nauseum. But when you've studied Dr. King's works, you begin to understand that he had a profound support for labor. And he wrote about that as early as the late 50s, speaking to the AFL-CIO. So this was an annual gathering, a social gathering where workers or families or supporters, allies, a whole community broke bread together, but gave self-determination awards, hung out, and it was a very powerful kind of a weekend. We also had Sunday brunch where workers could and activists could get together and strategize about where they plan to go the next year. And then lastly, was formed the Workers' Unity Network, was to educate the Labor Party about the importance of organizing in the South and expose workers to the concept of a independent politics beyond at the national level, beyond the Democratic and the Republican Party. Along with that, or parallel to that, was the Black Left Unity Network to raise the question of Black working class as fundamental to Black liberation and to unify the Black left to overcome fragmentation that was happening there. And then lastly, I'll just mention some names of, the Communiversity is the birthplace, or the child rather, of the Abner Berry Freedom Library. And then there was the Wilson Labor Council. When the AFL-CIO pulled the Central Labor Council out of Wilson, North Carolina, leaving no place for unions to meet, we established, and I think Jim Wren is on today. Jim Wren was an anchor for the Wilson Labor Council that brought together unions and workers' organizations together. There was an area-wide People's Health Screening Clinic and other clinics that we helped to support, and workers from different workplaces helped to support. There were the workers' speak-outs, which I think Ashaki mentioned. And lastly, to make real international solidarity, there was the Southern International Education Committee that sponsored delegations to Cuba, Venezuela, and Haiti and other countries. And so, we wanted to say that there's without these kinds of institutions existing in the community, some is embryonic, some, weaker and stronger than others, but it played a role. It played it created an atmosphere of support for the kind of work that was happening inside those workplaces, and gave places where workers could come together outside the workplace and support that workplace organizing inside. And with that, I'll throw it to back over to Amiri, and we'll go on to the last section.
Thank you, Mama Shaf, for grounding us in the institutions that Black Workers for Justice built. Now we're going to transition into key lessons and events of organizing in the present. And I'm facilitating, so I can't see if he's on, but I know he's on. I want to turn it over to the elder Ngaza Laughing House, who is a founding member of Black Workers for Justice, served as the vice chair of the organization, and has been a core part of its organizing to really talk about a big turning point for Black Workers for Justice in terms of organizing in the South, with the tragic Hamlet fire of 1991 and what it did, how Black Workers for Justice responded, and what it meant for this larger effort to organize the South, building committees, things of that nature. So, Elder in Gaza, I'll turn it over to you.
Do people hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Well, I don't think you want to see me. It might terrify everybody, but just want to say it's an honor having been with the Black Workers for Justice from its beginning to where it is now. And the main challenge is still what it has always been, which is boring into workplaces, building workplace committees. And also not just building the workplace committees, engaging the workers in those workplace committees and building cadre with those workers in those workplace committees by making sure that we're calling upon the folks who are on the front line of struggle in those workplaces being engaged in every way. Some of the cadre that went down with Ashaki and others to help us organize the workers inside the Imperial Food Plant down in Hamlet, North Carolina, way back in '91, actually came out of the workplaces, meaning there was lots of training, lots of engagement, taking the workers out of the workplace into the community, seeing how broad this class struggle was, this class war was, and particularly the war and the assault on the Black community, which, as you know, continues with what's going on today, with the ban on DEI, with the attacks on many of these rural plants, which are mostly Black and brown people, just trying to weaken the laws that we've had used to fight back and to empower the workers by getting them to actually take up these struggles and filing complaints and petitions in their plants. But I think the Sheridan and Poole food fire plant fire that killed 25 workers in '91 was very, very important. It gave us a chance to convene not only all of our different workers in the various workplaces around North Carolina and in the South, but also the Workers Want Fairness campaign had built this unbelievable network in the Midwest, in the Northeast, in the Mid-Atlantic states, in the Deep South. And we were able to mobilize thousands of people to Hamlet for our March for Justice in Hamlet shortly after the fire. Busloads of chartered buses came into this city. The marches outnumbered the population of the city of Hamlet. And it put pressure on not only the bosses in the plant, but also on the North Carolina Labor Commissioner, who was later on fired because of the fact that they did not have fire extinguishers or inspections that were very much a part of what their obligation was. So And also the other thing, I keep a poster here at the Fruit of Labor Rural Cultural Center where Nathanette and I are right now, of Emmett Rowe, the owner of the plant. And we put these posters up, wanted for murder. Emmett Rowe, the CEO, the owner of the plant. So we were able to develop our own propaganda. When I say we, this is inclusive of the workers who are on the front lines, the ones who were in the plant, the ones who survived the this horrific fire. Um, this was a very important point for the development of this movement that we were developing, since this was national news. Consequently, other workers began to contact us after 91. Since this was national news, and certainly it was on the news regularly here in North Carolina, since it led to some firings, and also it led to us pushing for even more fire inspections of all the plants. As you know, today, there's still an insufficient number of inspections going on, but this is the kind of movement we're going to need right now in this moment that we're in right now. The Southern Workers Assembly. We're going to need a movement which is rooted and based inside the plants, with workers on the front line being a part of our local workers' assemblies. This was the lesson that was learned, and this is the lesson that we continue to push forward as we began to broaden our workplace organizing, not only in the private sector, but the public sector. Shortly after, we were able to, and I'm thankful to the Durham City Workers Union, which Nathanette and I were leaders of way back in the 1980s. Matter of fact, 83, we've been there in that in the city of Durham as city workers. We were able to get the attention of various national unions, and consequently, it led to the meeting of some of those international unions, like SEIU, Service Employees International Union, the Communication Workers of America, ASME, UE. It drew all their interest. I'm not going to take much time trying to summarize all of that, but this campaign, Justice in Hamlet, was critically important in terms of expanding our organizing into other southern states, including some of the work that we did for Black Empowerment down in Georgia, where Ashaki led some of our work with some of our members down there, and also it spread some of our membership up in the Maryland, D.C.
Elder
area.
guys, I think we lost you. Are you still there?
He's still there. We can hear him. I can hear him.
Mm-hmm. I hear him too. He's
Keep
good.
going on, Asa.
And it helped us develop this broader vision that we had to do more than just build a movement here in North Carolina. We had to build a Southern movement. And peace and blessings be upon our beloved comrade, Saladin Muhammad. We began to envision how do we build that broader Southern movement. And as you know, just to accelerate my portion of this presentation, it led to the vision for building the Southern Workers Assembly. There was several efforts prior to, which Don Cavallini, Jim, myself, and many of us have participated in. Nathanette and many of us have participated in, but it didn't really come to the fruition and building a great foundation as we have in 2012 when we founded the Southern Workers Assembly down in Charlotte, North Carolina. So just want to accelerate that a bit, since we want to have a lot of time for discussion, and we're about 5 minutes to 8.
Mhm.
Any other spots y'all think I should fill in?
Well, one thing I'll mention, this is Ashaki, that that Hamlet that the Hamlet fire, it changed laws in North Carolina as well. And that it had to change the whole approach, and it spread throughout all of the plants that we have been in over the years. They took up funds to send down to Hamlet for the workers, but you know, I think you mentioned the inspections that took place in all these plants across the state, uh, you know, which wasn't being done before, and laws to really upgrade and hire more people into the, you know, state OSHA system. So all of that was involved. UAW brought, you know, seemed like 8 or 10 buses down for the march. We had about 4 or 5,000 people marching on Hamlet at that time. So uh, those are just some of the results that came from that work as well.
In summary, just to conclude, what we shared with you had major lessons, some which were shortcomings, things we could have done better, like we should have definitely kept on doing our work down in the Hamlet, Richmond County area, where we got 3 or 4 people from Richmond County on this Zoom session, but certainly valuable lessons about building organizations in the workplace, mobilizing workers in the workplace, petitions, wearing ribbons. We wore ribbons inside those plants. We wore buttons. We circulated letters. We filed complaints, and we did this also in the public sector. I'll never forget Don Cavallini and others bringing these letters to the state legislature to push for meet and confer and other rights for workers in the public sector. Consequently, it led to some of the inroads that we've made. As y'all know, at this point, we get executive orders. The UE 150 and other public sector unions get executive orders from all the governors giving us certain rights to post, to be recognized, for payroll deduction, for meet and confer with the governor and the agency heads. Out of this Imperial Food Fire came lots of valuable lessons. And the main lesson is building rank and file engagement inside the workplaces. And I know in many of the assemblies don't have that kind of ongoing work inside workplaces. So hopefully this can be helpful. Some of the lessons that we're sharing can be helpful. I yield the floor.
Yes, thank you, Elder and Gaza, and thank you, everyone. I'm gonna um, move us to open it up for questions, but there are some points here that I think we should touch on. But as you mentioned, it's close to 8 o'clock. It's a Thursday night, and I know there are probably a lot of questions that are there. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and move us into more of a Q&A where people can ask questions. And I encourage other Black Workers for Justice members and leaders from the era we talked about. Mama Naima Muhammad is on, who is a founding member of Black Workers for Justice, and I know Ajamu Dillahunt, not me, but my grandfather and my grandmother Rukia are on. I know Mama Nathanette Mayo is on, and I know Jim Wren and Don Cavallini are on too. So as questions begin to emerge I encourage you all to jump in too. Um,
Amiri, just before you we open up the floor, could you show those last 2 slides, just those last two points, just to make sure that those are drawn out as part of our lessons, if you don't mind.
yes, ma'am. I'm getting it up right now. Here we go.
Yeah, we just want to mention the importance of the collective leadership, which is part of our methodology over all these years. And you can see the executive committee meeting here. You know, we monthly, at least monthly, several times a month would meet. This is showing the inside of the Workers Center, but there was discussion, sum ups, planning. This was the kind of approach that we had. It wasn't just one person directing his or her ideas. It was our collective thinking and summing up the work. So I think that's very important. The next slide from here, Also, just want to mention, we talked about, and it's still true today, that our work is both a part of the labor movement. On the left, this is showing our attendance at the National Labor Party convention in Ohio in 1996, I think it was. Um, and us meeting together, and and we were there calling on, again, the Labor Party to take a position on organizing the South and the importance of the South as a part of the national labor movement. But also, we mentioned the question of being a part of the Black liberation movement, and this is reflecting years of work. Members of the Black Left Unity Network. These are, two separate meetings, but these were ongoing over the years, where we were bringing forces and the Black Left together, to meet. So these are all parts of our methodology. And so even today, as we work on BWFJ stuff, it's SWA, we're also fundamentally engaged with other aspects of the Black liberation movement. So it's, with Black workers, it's, to deal with both race and class, and with Black women workers, race, class, and gender. And if other questions, if gay rights or transgender, all of these things, they're part of the work at the same time. And so that's the qualitative aspect of how our work takes shape even today. So thank you, Brother Amirian. Just want to stress those aspects of our work that we think are lessons as well. So
Amira,
we can open.
I think we left out one, which was BWAM, the Black Workers Unity Network movement, where we were trying to pull together Black trade unionists from UAW, the CWA, the Teamsters. That too was a very important role that Black Workers for Justice played, particularly as we moved to the Labor Party, to make sure that we engaged the Black left labor, movement.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
That's
Yes,
right.
sir. Yeah, thank y'all so much. Thank you really for the presentations and taking us through this history on the call, but thank you for the years of work that you've put in to build the organizations and draw out lessons and to move our cause forward. So thank you so much. And I want to open it up to participants if there are questions. And again, think about your committees. Think about some of the challenges. Some stuff in the presentation was an introduction, was very broad, but there are some really key lessons that emerged in terms of the practical element of building worker committees and building power on the job and how you relate to community forces throughout your struggle and organizing effort. So you can put your question in the chat. You can raise your hand. You can go on stack, whatever it might be. But I want to open it up for questions. And then as you were getting your questions ready, I see a hand from somebody who's very, very, very important, Mama Naima. So I want to give her the floor, and we'll go into Q&A. Mama Naima.
Okay, thank you, Amiri. Hello, everybody. I just wanted to add in, as I sat and listened to the history, there was no mention of the Women's Commission. And so I was like, why are we not talking about the Women's Commission? That was a formation that led to specifically empowering women that was not attending meetings because they had child care issues. They had to worry about cooking meals. They had mates or spouses that thought that wasn't a woman's place. And there were many issues. There was abuse issues. There was, many issues that women were dealing with. And so through the Women's Commission, we started having the women speak out sessions. And it was through those sessions that women gained the strength to say, I can attend meetings when I want to. And, if childcare is a problem or cooking is a problem, let that be their partner or mates or husband's problem, not something that they have to miss a meeting for. And then we always try to provide food at the meeting so that if that was an issue, women knew they could come there attend the meetings and get a meal for themselves and their children if they brought them with them, in order to enable them to come to the meetings, be able to come and know that they would, their children would be taken care of. And so I thought that was important. And, the leafleting of the Rocky Mount Undergarment happened mainly by the Women's Commission, going out early mornings, leafleting over at that plant. And out of that came one of our strongest women leaders, Miss Ida Body,
Right.
and that was a result of all of the leafleting and conversations with women at that plant.
Mhm.
And so I just wanted to make mention of that since I didn't hear it nowhere, but it is an integral part of BWFJ's history. Thank y'all.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Mama Naima. And thank you for the work of the Women's Commission. And I see the faces of many leaders of the Women's Commission on too. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I want to open it up for people for questions, for for comments. Well, really questions. Um, but if there are some comments in there, that's okay too.
Mhm.
And again, feel free to use the chat or come off of mute, raise your hand, use the stack, and as people are getting ready and we're talking about this aspect of committees, one of the things about Hamlet, that was mentioned, but the organization of the survivors of the fire, Imperial Food Workers for Justice, I believe it was called, and then a lot of
Well,
those workers that came out of the survivors organizing after the fire went to the West Coast for one of Black Workers for Justice organized the South tours. We're talking about the need of organizing workers in the South, urging the rank and file within trade unions to call on the international unions to invest in Southern organizing. So it's in terms of empowering workers in the workplace to be a central part of the work that was crucial. I see William Ingram, Brother Ingram, from Richmond County, with his hand up. Brother Ingram.
Good evening, everyone. This is Will Ingram. I'm also a member of Black Works for Justice. I think this is a great educational tool that we've all been waiting for a while and definitely needed. So I appreciate everybody, all the elders on the call, and also you, Amir, for putting it together tonight. Really appreciate it. Coming from Richmond County and being down here and working in the community as a grassroots organization, Richmond County Coalition for Justice and Black Empowerment, my question is to a lot of the elders in the room. When engaging after something happens like Imperial Foods with the community, re-engaging after such a long time. And, I was only a youth when that fire happened, but going out and seeing the after effects of what it does to a community like this, losing so many people from one location, the pain and the trauma is still here. So when we try to get out and reach out to these people in our community, our family members, they're still suffering right now in this moment. So trying to get them to come back out and want to participate when it comes to their jobs, some of them holding on to their jobs, even though they're facing health ailments and issues continuously, they have to work. But trying to get in there, our biggest challenge is just trying to get folks to commit. What would your advice be to get folks to actually make a commitment and be willing to see the bigger picture and willing to sacrifice a little bit of their time to get out and do some of these great things that you guys have laid out that work, things that work?
It's a great question. I'll
I'll
turn it
speak
over.
to, yeah, I'll speak to some of that a little bit. Um, One of the things that these years of work have taught us is that we have to get workers engaged in struggle around, whatever issues they're confronting or problems they're confronting. as people don't really necessarily learn by you're just telling them, this idea, that idea. They learn by being engaged. And so it's very important to begin getting workers involved in challenging and confronting conditions, whether in the community. We're talking about 40 years of history, and we can hardly cover that in an hour and a half or so of all the different aspects of BWFJ's work over all those years. So we tried to just focus tonight on some things that would be relevant to what we're trying to do now with the Southern Workers Assembly and other, current aspects of the work. A lot of our work, I saw a question about, what's today, are we organizing committees? We don't necessarily have a lot of committees in workplaces today, but we're talking about re-engaging through building SWA, rebuilding committees in the various workplaces. Once we formed UE Local 150, and we also had UE organizing in Virginia over the years, and we had BWFJ chapters in different parts of the South, in Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia, where we were building. So most of our work during those years went into that, especially UE 150. So that's been the extent of our work, and that led to the formation of Southern Workers Assembly to try to build infrastructure throughout the South. So that's where we are now. I think we got to return to the source, so to speak, with re-engaging through the workers' assemblies, new committees to start up in these new workplaces. A lot of the places where we were, as we mentioned, closed, because of the change in the economy of, commerce shifting out to other countries for cheaper labor. So, so that took us into the public sector even more. But that's where we are today, trying to extend this infrastructure question throughout the South, engagement with the workers' assemblies, and then building committees in those areas where the workers' assembly. So I think that's very important. But we have to get workers involved in taking up issues, challenging unjust conditions. That's how you get the commitments from workers. If you don't have that, just meeting and talking, it doesn't. It's not enough. There has to be action that workers are taking around real things that they care about and think about and that are impacting them day to day. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you. I see Elder in Gaza has his hand up too. So Elder.
Fail.
So this is Nathanette, Black Workers for Justice member, Fruit of Labor Singing Ensemble, and UE. One of the things that I remember that we did that was very effective that I don't think is done hardly at all anymore is that when we collected signatures at the gate, we got home addresses, and we would go door to door and actually talk with workers in their homes. And I think that's something that we've really gotten away from now with the invent of emails and
Zoom,
texting and all of that. But we would actually go sit in people's homes and talk with them. And I think that played a big role in the education process and also just the strategy of Black Workers for Justice and developing people into the workplace organizing committees. I'm finished.
I think I'd like to add just in terms of even observing work that SWA has done in and that has been recognized, even the smallest things that bring workers together in unified action. And so when there was the Safe Lives, Save Jobs campaign, and workers wore stickers, they wore the same sticker, onto their jobs. And this happened across North Carolina. Now that might sound like a very small thing, but when you're able to have a picture of and show, workers in Charlotte and workers in Durham and workers in South Carolina and elsewhere all doing the same kind of action, then it begins to build a kind of spirit. And again, folks beginning to learn that they're not alone. reinforcing, I think, Ashaki's point about action, and the idea of things being grounded in the workplace and being able to talk to each other about just something as small as that. The key thing is like figuring out united action. I wanted to maybe also put someone on the spot. I see Jim Wren is on, and one thing I think is important is the impact that organized workplace, how that committee in Camus was started, how they started, how they grew, the level of creativity that was used inside right, what is now called Rocky Mount Engine Plant was amazing. And it had a real impact on the community around it. Both what was called the Bloomer Hill community, but the larger area. And so it impacted the health screening clinic, creation of the Empowerment Alliance, the creation of other organizations, and motivation of both Whitaker's Community Association and Bloomer Hill. So I'd like if he could talk a little bit about how they started, what were some of the tactics that they used, so that gives folks ideas about, different ways and different ways that not to be just stilted and think it's got to be just one way. And so I'd like to put Jim on the spot.
Well, there's a lot to be said. Briefly, workers at Casade Diesel Company in Whitakers, North Carolina, was a joint venture of Cummins and Case at the time, were searching for different ways to address worker fairness at the plant. I think we were, to far as this narrative here tonight, the key thing is the sledge lot struggle was a key breakout point in Rocky Mount. Affected workers. I remember I would go down on 1988 to be on the picket line with sledge workers where they were protesting the closing of the plant, no severance pay. And then when workers, we had as Ashaki referred to, the workers' school in '89, the speak outs, they began to organize the different workplace committees. I know some of the former sledge lot workers came to work at CDC and were instrumental with me in kicking off the Martin Luther King Day petition for a paid holiday in 1990, which it was our first major campaign that was successful. After 8 months, we went a paid holiday. What we immediately did then, and one of the sledge lot workers leaders was the first president of CDC Workers Unity Committee. So there's a linkage from that struggle to the next stage. What we did then was immediately, when we won the holiday, immediately reach out to the Bloomer Hill community adjacent to the plant and plan for a Martin Luther King Day event every year, which it continues to this day, 35 years later. What that did then was get us involved with the community, the fight for Black majority rule in the town of Whitakers, which was a Black majority town under all white government, and we were able to overturn that but then we joined with UE because we saw the other plants around were losing the NRB elections, and we wanted to have a non-majority union. UE was the only union willing to support us in that regard, so we joined in 1994. We did, again, with the help of UB, build on what we had developed with Bloomer Hill and develop a community empowerment alliance in 1995 of labor and community groups in the Whitakers, Enfield, Baltimore area that continue to fight for Black majority rule in that area and also support workers' issues in our plant and other local plants. Then we also reached out when the UNC housekeepers won their famous lawsuit in 1996. We immediately reached out to have them join with us, and that's how connected UE with the housekeepers, that's led to the into the North Carolina Public Service Workers Union, led to the founding of UE 150. We as the CC Workers Union Committee then joined with a UE committee at Vermont American Machine Tool Plant in Greenville, North Carolina, that was started with the help of Don Cavallini and the Pitt County Coalition Against Racism. They're still active with us today in the SWA. And so the two groups merged to form Carolina Auto Aerospace Machine Workers Union, and was given a charter by UE in 2003. And that plant unfortunately closed in 2008, but the workers at Cummins Rock Engine Plant just continued on as part of CAMU Local 150 to this day. I know there's probably other things you want me to mention. You mentioned the health clinics. You know, there was a people's clinic movement in East North Carolina. There was a people's clinic in Bloomer Hill, which we helped support there in Whitaker's, as well as I think there was about 4 other clinics in East North Carolina towns that were part of our movement. Health clinics that provided free medical care once a month with the help of various medical school students that continued up until last year. So there's things that go on today that are direct. You can say directly go back to the things that were presented here tonight about the 1980s, the beginnings of BWFJ and the sledge lot struggle. You want me to ask another question? I don't want to get
There's some
all over that
questions
now.
There's some questions in the
Sums it
chat.
up.
But Amir has his hand up.
Yeah, I was going to get to the question in the chat here from Laura Harris, who says, you all spoke about including issues going on abroad in the Justice Speaks newspaper. Can you all expand more on how y'all have related issues going on at home to issues going on abroad in y'all's outreach papers and education? And I guess I'll add on to that question too, you know, with the level of fascism we're existing now, how does that relate to worker resistance taking place on the shop floor and in the community? So we'll do that, and then we may have time for one more question after that. But I'll turn it over to you all to really answer that.
25 words or less.
I want to remind folks that when we had our first newsletter, Ajamo Dillahunt Sr. and I, we always tried to relate those kind of issues to the local struggles going on in the workplace. But more importantly, the leadership of Ajamo Sr. on the radio show Justice Speaks was key. And we didn't talk much about that, but having access to the WSHA Justice Speaks radio show, Ajamo Sr. had that thing jumping with international issues, with local issues, with music, and it was very important in terms of linking up our travels. Many of our members have traveled not only to Europe to meet with trade unions across Europe, but also various African nations, South Africa, Brazil, Venezuela, even met with the Workers' Party in Brazil. And we would always try to relate those sort of travels with what we call report backs, either in the newspaper, because we had an international section in our Justice Speaks newsletter. No, in the newspaper when it became a newspaper, and also on the radio show that Ajamo Sr. did such a great job, helping us broadcast. And that was in a very broad area, that broadcast from Justice Speaks News from WSHA Radio.
Both Ajamu and Shaf were hosts on Justice Speaks.
Yeah, Ajamu was in Raleigh and I was in Rocky Mount. I think another aspect of tying the international work in is Angaza and Ashaki have mentioned, we not only we studied COSATU, the Congress of South African Trade Unions, for what their strategies, what their tactics were. We had speakers who would come in, from international struggles. I remember trade unionist Miguel Marmol from Guatemala, and I don't remember the issues that around which he was touring the U.S., but we were able to get him to come to Rocky Mount. And because, of the work that was going on inside the workplaces, and I guess the way that we were able to tell workers, look, here's a worker from Guatemala who's talking about the same issue that y'all are dealing with, was health and safety and trying to organize against the bosses. And so we had I think it was maybe about 15, 20 workers who came out, here in Eastern North Carolina, not connected with, in terms of people would think it was just kind of isolated for everything, and sat down and had a very spirited discussion, with the trade unionists from a country that they were not familiar with, but they were able to have that kind of, to see that kind of solidarity with each other. We also intentionally organized delegations to expose ourselves, workers, to what was happening in Cuba, in Venezuela, Nicaragua, and talked about what those struggles were about, what those key struggles are about. And of course, other folks mentioned Brazil. We had a delegation that was at the World Conference Against Racism. I think Ashaki, Naima was there. And I was trying, while we were on here, I was trying to pull up a picture that I just sent. Naima is showing Naima and Sister Rukia with Asada Shakur in Cuba. So that these kinds of experiences that we intentionally, it wasn't about the usual suspects going, but it was about trying to spread those kinds of experiences as far and wide, as deep as possible. And then lastly, and thank you, Naima, I wasn't able to go in detail. I think I had 4 minutes left and 3 or 4 elements to go through, but the Women's Commission organized the International Women's Day program every year. And a couple of years we did it a whole weekend. And it was always, number one, an international speaker from some struggle that was going on particularly sharp that year. We've had Palestinian sisters, South African sisters, Haiti, Nicaragua, Senegal, Mexico, workers who would bring the word of what was going on in their movement in terms of at the workplace as well as their national struggle. But in addition to that, we would combine it with a speak out as well as how-to workshops, how to chair a meeting, how to do a basic leaflet, how to chair a meeting, public speaking, where points on if you had to speak, what are 2 or 3 things to remember to do to help get you through that. And then, very importantly, the brothers, and we got to reinstitute this practice. Amiri, you got to be the lead on this. Is that the men were responsible for all of the food, all of the childcare, all of the logistics, all of the roles that women, quote unquote, were always put into roles. And women led the work in terms of the programs and the videotaping, the technical, all those so-called, male roles. And it had a profound effect on women who, as Naima mentioned earlier, who had never seen men help with children, who had never seen men serve food. And they would come back and they would talk about the impact that it had on themselves. And so that this was I won't say a tradition, but it was something that was a regular event that the Women's Commission has done. So I just want to, say those are some of the ways that we tied international work into the work that, at the community level and at the workplace level. I see two hands, Jim and Fruit of Labor, probably Nathanette.
And Ashaki.
Oh, sorry,
yeah.
sis. You
It's
feel
okay.
Real quick, 2 lessons of the Workplace Committee at Consolidated Diesel Cummins Rock Management Plant. The petition tradition, engage your co-workers in petitions around grievances, and the newsletter, Unity News in our case. 2 most important things in organizing a committee: petition tradition and a newsletter. That's it.
Yeah, I'll be brief. As of last night, the UE Local 150 Executive Board met, and we were presented with information about how our pension funds for city workers, state workers, and teachers was invested in Israeli bonds. So we've joined a petition campaign to highlight the Palestinians' right to self-determination and the Zionist genocide by participating. We voted unanimously to participate in this campaign. So that's a good concrete example of linking the international issue up with the workplace issue, since we're going to have to circulate this petition in our workplaces.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go to Mama Shaki, and then we'll because we're at 8:33, and then we'll conclude remarks and get ready for part 2.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to quickly mention, it was a great question about how does the international tie in. One part aspect of our work, which is why we want to do a part 2, maybe next month, or whenever the education committee can help us determine a date. But a part 2 looking at the international questions more specifically in other aspects of BWFJ's work, the work in the community around a lot of issues, but environmental racism is something that BWFJ has always been involved in. But also there were internationally, the question of privatization of public goods and services, which was an international question in many countries, and the question of, the central role that auto has played in the world economy. And so we were able to organize workers' schools and bring workers from the international areas into the South. We convened in Atlanta at Morehouse College. But we held the 2 international worker schools there, one on privatization in the public sector and one on the auto sector, as the U.S. South was, number 1 in foreign direct investment because of the lack of unions in the area. And so we were tying in concrete questions internationally to the conditions in the South. And so that's something that we want to try to talk about in the future at a part 2 of this, to look at the question of social movement unionism that was emerging around the world. As Shop mentioned, the studies that we did of Brazil and South Africa, and also, a little bit of the Philippines trade union movement, which was massive and also as important as the others. But to look at those and, the question of, building unions that are not recognized in the plant, not going through elections, but establishing and building unions inside long term. This was a part of our work that I think is relevant also to us now. So the international questions were directly tied in. We showed how the South was a part of what these third world countries were going through. The U.S. South was in similar conditions, and internationally, workers from other countries were able to learn that, as well as us learning, from other international workers and delegations that were taking place. So we hope there can be a part 2, because there's a lot of important experience and lessons from that work and, the community work in terms of in the environment and other important questions that have been, part of BWFJ's ongoing work over the years. I'll stop there. Turn it back to Amiri.
Yes, it's 8:36 on a Thursday, but I have the feeling, and I know you all have it too, that we could keep going for maybe an hour or two. or even longer, but BWFJ's history requires so much more time, so much more thought, so much more engagement, and there's so much wisdom and lessons that these elders, these leaders, these still ongoing fighters have for our work in the present, SWA wise, but also movement wise, politically, and how we move our fight forward. And I just want to say, one thing too, that Black Workers for Justice, as part of its work for 40 plus years, did not only engage in work at the grassroots level, in the workplace, in community, in the fight for political power, but they also theorized about it too, putting forward and publishing documents about new trade unionism, publishing documents about the South, the shifts in the economy. And so the Justice Speaks newspaper certainly served as a place for updates. But there was also some really sharp analysis about the world at that time, the shift in economy at that time, and to really draw this point home, which I really want to say and should have said earlier, is that Black Workers for Justice leaders were also workers themselves. Mama Shaf worked in the post office. My grandfather worked in the post office. My grandmother, a school teacher. Elder Ngaza is working in city government in Durham for the state of North Carolina. Mama Nathanette is working in Durham, leading the union there of Durham City Workers. And so you have this constant assessment of the workplace coming from the workplace. And at times, BWFJ members were leaders in their local unions, while also being a member of Black Workers for Justice and providing this broader direction about where the movement should go. So what we this part one really hope to do is to not just simply ground the work into some real practice and remember what has been done to help guide us forward, but to really call out that we need to raise more questions about BWFJ's history. We need to study it and we need to use it, because if we begin to use it, it's going to help us get out of this situation that we're in. And so it's something we have to take serious. I hope people can provide the feedback. I put my email in the chat, so please, please, please share your comments, share your thoughts. What maybe could have landed better for you? Could have been a different format. Did you receive the information in a way that you wanted to? So please send that feedback, and I want to yield it to a BWFJ elder to close us out and give us our marching orders for what's next. But we're at 8:40, and people are still on. So I think they want to hear what y'all have to say to close us out. We can hear from multiple people. I think that's okay, but you all should have the last word as we close out this part one, and we prepare for part two, three, four, and I heard there might even be a part five. But I'll I'll turn it over to y'all.
Well, I'll say, and others may join in as well. But I want to just thank everybody for coming out. We really appreciate it, and just to state that a lot of the thinking and positions that we're taking in the work that's ongoing now today, it's coming from our practice and years of work. They're just not ideas and theories that we're tossing out because we have an opinion about something. It doesn't mean to say that everything that we experienced applies to today, but things got to be tested in practice. But we do think that the work that we've done over all these years, does lend towards some thinking about how to proceed forward, what we can do, that what is possible to do. It comes from our practice, the outlook that we have, the way we approach work, and wanting to reiterate that, and to lend toward an understanding that this is the basis of upon which how we saw the emergence of SWA and what it meant and means today about organizing the South. So we want to go forward, with that work, continue to build and develop it, learn through practice, again, implement the lessons that we've learned where we don't have to reinvent the wheel of things that have worked in the South, but also to carry this work forward with new generations coming forward and new challenges that we're facing today with the fascism and everything else that's going on. So thank everybody so much for coming tonight. And please join us again if we're able to do part 2 next month. I think those struggles and lessons also will be valuable, hopefully, for the ongoing work. So
I would like to
I'll
thank everybody as
yeah.
well.
Go ahead, man.
Your
Thank you.
patience. I want to remind you that yes, we have a lot of practice, but out of the practice comes very valuable lessons, things that we may have done wrong and we could have done better, but also some valuable things that have moved us forward to where we are right now. But also want to remind folks about this cultural question, that culture is more than entertainment when we're doing it. It's propaganda, it's agitation. Every army, and we're an army of working class soldiers, all of us on this call, and we need something to march to. We need a tune to march to lift our morale, our spirits, so that we fight with resistance, and that we see that to surrender without a marching song to march forward is surrender. So let's understand the value of this culture, the music, the art, the pens, and all the things that our Cultural Commission has learned over the last 40 or so years, that culture is very important to propaganda. You have any final words, Ned, about new?
So, even in the meetings that you're in or workplaces that you're a part of, buttons, all of that is culture. All of that makes a difference in building our struggle and building confidence and fighting resistance in workers and in our communities. So I think if we look at everything that we do in terms of how can we use our culture to push those struggles forward, and we need to also use that I in the work that we do.
Mm.
And thank you.
Good, Ned. The only thing I would say is organize, dig in, organize. Organize, dig in, organize, and let's close out with some fruit of labor with those lessons that they had just shared.
All
Thank you,
right.
everybody.
Thank y'all so much, and prepare your ears. And I'm going to show you the website for some beautiful sound from the Fruit of Labor Singing Ensemble.
Thank you,
All right.
Mira. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom.
Oh, they're going to do it live.
Boom, 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 boom.
If you're feeling battered by the news you read and the TV's making you blue, we all know life has never been a stroll down Fifth Avenue. But if some worry that the dream has died and nothing worthwhile is left, tell them like a runner in a marathon race, we're catching a second breath. Catch a second breath.
Catch a second breath. Rain or shine or in between, we're working on a living dream. All right. Let's get rocking, everybody. We're
Thank
working on a
y'all.
living dream.
Good night.
Good
Good night,
night.
everybody.